Boom, and we're back. Okay, so it's been a while, but I'm back today to react to the new GHB. And, well, I'm super excited for this one. I have read it, okay, so this is not pure raw reactions, because I also think that doesn't necessarily have that much value, right? Like, you don't want to listen to me read the same sentence over and over again, because I don't understand the Warhammer English, okay? As always, go check out Onwards AOS. We're going to have plenty of content coming up about learning this GHB, learning the battle plans, deep dives and such over the next few weeks. So if you're interested in joining Onwards Prime and getting access to that content, please do. We also had recently we have this fight night, right? These weekly games against famous TTS players, and we had recently a game against the Danish captain who just won. So if you're interested in seeing the best lists in the world being played, I'd recommend you check out Onwards AOS. Anyway, let's get into the region of war, ANDTORRRR, the bitter land. Now, we haven't left Gur, but instead of Gur, we're more of like a grrr. You know what I mean? Like we're shivering, That was a terrible joke, but we just got to start off with a little bit of a cringe, okay? So, we're in ANDTORRRR. We're shivering. Right now in Japan, I'm definitely not shivering. It's like 34 today, and I'm in a room with no aircon. So if you see like a bead of sweat begin halfway through this video, that's why, because this room's very hot. And I can't have the fan on because we want the audio to be kind of nice. Okay, so we're in ANDTORRRR. Now, let's throw everything out from the previous GHB. So, if it doesn't say that we have the 1-inch thing for the heroes to protect them from shooting, it's gone. Okay, if we don't have GVs, it's gone. If we don't have, fight in the hero phase with the hero, it's gone. Okay, that's all out the window. So instead, we're in a wizard season. Okay, now we all knew this was going to come at some point. We've had the monster season, we've had the infantry season, we've had the, foot hero season, generic foot hero seasons, and now we have the ANDTORRRIAN loci. ANDTORRRIAN locuses. Yeah. And these are wizard heroes that are not unique with a wounds characteristic of 9 or less. So pretty much the same requirement as Galatian champions, just they have to be wizards as well. Okay. Yeah. And what's special about them? Well, at the start of the battle round, after you determine priority, the person taking the second turn can pick one hero. So you do actually pick at the start of the battle round when that happens. And yeah, you can attempt to cast one extra spell and unbind one extra spell in that battle round with that ANDTORRRIAN locus. Okay, now if they're not an ANDTORRRIAN locus, you can receive one command point for that battle round that can be used by that hero. So like if you're going second with a non-ANDTORRRIAN army, you could have 4 CPs. That's pretty good, right? Otherwise, you're going to get to cast one spell and unbind an extra one. So that's pretty good, right? Now, it's nowhere near as strong as some of the first, second turn balancing things we had back in, like the first one where you could burn an objective, which is like massive, right? That's basically Jaws of Gallet. That was every mission, okay? And then we had the Proving Grounds, which was like almost as big as that. And then last season, we really didn't have much. This is a step up, I think, from last season, okay? Last season, you could do 2 heroic actions, which was just really terrible in most situations. This one is just a little bit better than that, but not quite the same level, I don't think, as the Proving Grounds or the Burning Objectives, okay? All right, and then we have Primal Magic. Now, this is very long, okay? But the first thing is it occurs at the start of both players' hero phases. And you roll a dice, and for each 4-up, each player receives 1 Primal Magic dice. So basically, you and your opponent will roll a dice, and if you both roll a 4-up, then you both get 2 Primal Magic dice. Does that make sense? No matter who rolls at the 4-up, you each get 1 Primal Magic dice. Okay, and then after you attempt to cast and unbind a spell, or dispel an endless spell, you can roll one of the Primal Magic dice, and if you do, you can add the result to the casting, unbinding, or dispelling roll. Okay, and the player can continue to add additional Primal Magic dice until the caster suffers a Primal Miscast, or there are no more Primal Magic dice to be rolled. Okay? Yes. So, basically, you can add them to cast, unbinds, dispels, and if you have multiple of them, so you both roll a 4-up or you acquire them some other way, then you can use multiple of them for the same spell. The important thing is it's like afterwards. So you're going to roll the dice, you're going to fail your spell, and then you go like, all right, we're going to chuck a Primal Magic dice in, okay? That's going to be the meta of what you do, all right? Okay, then abilities that allow you to re-roll the cast, unbind, or dispel must be used before you do the primal magic dice. And I'm assuming this kind of needs to be fact, but I'm assume that this would include like Kairos changing the dice, any like modifications and stuff. I'm assuming that would happen as well before this. Okay. Yeah. And now there's a bit about rerolls, so you can't. If you do reroll, you can't do primal magic dice. So if you reroll your casting roll with Master of Magic, you can't, after rerolling it, use the primal magic dice. So it's kind of like a substitute for a reroll. Like you get a shit casting roll, and then you replace that shit casting roll with a reroll with Master of Magic, or you keep the shit casting roll and then you add an extra dice to it with primal magic. That's the kind of idea. Now, at the end of each battle round, any primal magic have been lost, but obviously you're going to pursue between players' turns. Okay, and why this is big is like if you're going second, you potentially have more access to primal magic dice, right? Or because your opponent's going to go, you're both going to roll a 4 up, and you can just keep those primal magic dice until it rolls around to your turn, right? So there's kind of a hidden advantage to going second here as well, where you're going to potentially have more access to primal magic dice. So yeah, that's kind of baked into this second advantage, okay? Now, the disadvantage of primal magic dice is you can suffer a primal miscast, which is very similar to the Slaves to Darkness miscast, where basically you would roll 3 dice, and if you rolled any double 1 on those 3 dice, it would miscast. The primal miscast, however, is really bad. It's D3 plus 3 mortal wounds, and every unit within 3, so actually also enemy units, suffers D3 mortal wounds, and obviously you can't cast any more spells because it's a miscast. And if you double 6, you have this thing called Irresistible Force that we had back in, I don't know if that's from 40k or Fantasy, I can't remember, but basically it's successfully cast and can't be unbound. Okay, quite nice. Yeah. Now, what's interesting about this is if you have a way to just like guarantee double 6, so for example, just use Destiny Dice on double 6, or I guess that would be the example, right? If you Destiny Dice double 6 and then you add Primal Dice to it, then it's guaranteed to not be unbound. I mean, double 6 anyway is pretty high, but like if your opponent has an auto unbind, that might be a cute way around it. Yeah. Now, if you do double 6, it kind of counts as a miscast, so you can't cast any more spells, but both players receive 1 Primal Magic Dice. Okay, so that's a lot of stuff. But basically, on average, you're going to get 1 Primal Magic Dice in each player's turn, and what's going to happen after that is you can choose to like use it in your opponent's turn as an unbind, or maybe you're going to keep it to your turn to do casting, that kind of thing, right? Yeah. What's interesting about this is that I think it's kind of tilted towards if you are a magic army, you kind of want to go second because you want to amass the primal magic dice. But if you're an unbinding army, you actually kind of want to go first because you're going to get some primal magic dice in your hero phase, and then your opponent's going to, they're going to have heaps in their hero phase, but you're going to have like 2 sets of primal magic dice to unbind them, right? So, whereas if you're, I guess they match, but I kind of think of it in the sense of, because magic, when you cast, like for example, you cast it on a 7, your opponent needs to roll an 8. There's always like a slight advantage to the current player turn. So if I'm like unbinding, and it's just like 1 dice versus 1 dice, I'm going to feel less confident about it. But if my opponent's like putting 1 dice at a spell and then I'm chucking 2 primal magic dice at it because I saved it from my first turn, maybe I feel better about that. Anyway, you can kind of see how this is related to the turn dynamics, and it's super interesting. But obviously there's a decent degree of risk involved. If you're going second, it might be just a really good idea if you got a spell that you need to get through to just spend 2 primal magic dice on it, or however many you've got, right? Like you got the plus D3 attack spell. In fact, you just throw all your primal magic dice at it. If your hero, miscasts and takes some wounds, in fact, they're going to probably heal 3 anyway, so it's not the end of the world, and you need to kind of get the spell off. All right. So, yeah, that's primal magic dice. Okay, so into the enhancements. I'll just zoom in a bit because I just realized this text is rather small. We have a bunch of Imgur garbage. We have the Nullstone adornments, which are basically, well, right now this doesn't really work because, it works. Okay, so there's this massive paragraph of text you can see at the top. The sum of it is, if you don't have a wizard, you can take these. But if you have a wizard that's an unnatural wizard, like with Arcane Tome, at the moment, I think you can probably take this. So you can kind of choose the order of enhancement, so you could like take this first and then take the Arcane Tome afterwards, and then say you're going to do that. But I think that'll get fact. Anyway, for now, you just basically think of it as Nullstone adornments. We're going to take it without any wizards. Okay, so we have 3 of them here. Now, I think some of these are a little weird, but okay, let's see what they're cooking. So, Handcuffed Nullstone Archon. You can unbind or dispel a spell in the enemy hero phase the same manner as a wizard, and when you do that successfully, you can do it again. Yeah, that one seems pretty good to me. It's not amazing, but I could potentially give you multiple unbinds. That's always good. Pouch of Null Dust. Okay, now this one I don't particularly like, but let's just get into it. So once per battle, you can unleash the Pouch of Null Dust. I don't know what it is. It's like a little pouch full of crystals from the Byron Bay or something. I don't know what it is. Anyway, until the end of that phase, so it's basically at the start of the hero phase. So theoretically, both players' turn, but I'm assuming you're going to use it in your opponent's turn. Unmodified casting rolls that include a double 1, 2, or 3 are treated as miscasts, and if a primal magic dice was rolled as part of the casting roll, they're primal miscasts, so potentially big damage to themselves. In addition, I like that. Roll the dice for each endless spell on the battlefield. On a 5-up, it's dispelled. That's completely whatever, but the first part of it is maybe okay. I just find with these once per battle kind of things, I just find when you do this, your opponent just doesn't roll any of those things, and then you wish you had one of the other ones. It's quite a strong effect, because like the probability that a 3 is going to be in your opponent's casting roll, and they're going to maybe doubt themselves about whether they should use a primal magic dice, that might be just like a good way of defending against it. But you kind of need to make sure that you still have some unbinds in your army to make use of this, because otherwise your opponent's just going to go like, all right, just roll like a 6, and then you have to be able to unbind it. So, yeah. That's why I think the Nullstone icon's a bit better. And then, I guess there might be a good synergy there, right? You could take the Nullstone icon and the Null Dust, and that would have like a really good potential combo. And then the Polished Nullstone Pebble, which is probably my favorite, is basically just like a 4-up spell ignore for the user. Except like on a 4-up, you just make your opponent pick a different target. Okay, so that's quite good for something that you just don't want to get murdered. It's just like a free 4-up spell ignore. Yeah, so pretty good. Yeah. Okay. Not amazing, but there we go. Okay, so the big thing about ANDTORRRR Loci, aside from the extra spell thing, is this Realm Sphere magic, which you can basically pick one spell from here instead of picking one from your army. So if your army has a really shit spell lore, which some exist, right? Some legitimately have quite bad spell lore. Like I'd say Feck, for the most part, is not that great. Okay, then you have these options here. Obviously, this also kind of like tilts you towards taking a spell enhancement, I'd say, because you probably want to take one of these and then one from your own lore, or like 2 of these or something like that, right? So Hoarfrost we saw... Sorry, I think my mic just peaked, but Hoarfrost we just saw in the preview, okay? We saw it in the preview on the Warhammer community article, where basically it's a spell that has a casting value of 8, and you roll a d3, and you can change the hit, wound, or rend characteristic of a melee weapon to match that result. So you pick one profile, and basically you roll a d3 first. So you might get a 1, 2, or a 3, and then you get to change the hit to wound or rend characteristic of that melee weapon to that result. Okay? Yeah, potentially really good for getting big rend values, but really it's ideal to cast it on a unit that fulfills the following conditions. You want to have something that has like one really strong weapon profile, and then you want to have it so that if you roll like a 1 on the d3, you can still do something with it. So an example of this would be something like a Mortec Guard, okay, where we have rend 1 and we wound on 4s, okay? So that means if I roll a 1 or 2, they're going to wound on 2s. If I roll a 3, I'm going to change them to rend 3, okay? Something like that, right? Where there's kind of a mitigation on rolling bad on the d3, okay? Yeah, but obviously extremely strong. This is going to kind of like define some armies for sure, and can really just build a hammer out of something that really should not be a hammer. Yeah. Okay, so Google Drive is interrupting this. So then we have Rupture. Casting value of 10, which is a lot. But you pick one predatory endless spell or incarnate, and the target immediately becomes wild and cannot be picked to be controlled or bonded for the rest of the battle. I think this is mostly useful for making your own incarnate wild. And this is really good for doing that. Yeah, super strong. Can definitely feel like this could be taken in Tzeentch with an incarnate, and you might just like use that command trait that lets you like successfully cast something on like a double 2. You might just do this, right? And then turn your incarnate wild without having to lose the wizard that cast it. It's pretty good. So yeah, this will open up a lot of interesting combos, I think, for armies that like want to turn the incarnate wild turn 1 but didn't really have an option before. This could be really good. Okay, Merciless Blizzard. Merciless Blizzard Entertainment. This is very WoW inspired, this spell. This is just like crazy, man. So it's got a casting value of 12. Big number. And a range of 12. Okay. If successfully cast, pick one enemy unit within range and visible to the caster, and they take 46 mortal wounds. 46 mortal wounds. Now, I know I'm going to play so many games with this where I'm sitting there with Scarbrand, and I need to roll my 5-up spell ignore for him not to die, and it's just going to fail every time, and I'm going to cry. But 46 mortal wounds, that's insane. For each roll of 1, the caster also suffers D3 mortal wounds that can't be negated. I mean, that's whatever. I think you're almost never going to roll 2. So, I mean, you're probably taking D3 mortal wounds max. That's fine. Yeah, but the range of the spell cannot be modified and must be measured from the caster, even if an ability would allow you to measure it from elsewhere. So you cannot put it through the portal. Okay, that's a big deal. And you also can't extend it with, like, Arcan or the thing that adds +9 range in Tzeentch. It's just 12-inch range. But still, it's annoying to play against. Yeah, because it's just always that potential of it happening, and 46 mortal wounds is like insane. So, yeah, I'm not sure I'm a fan, but for people who like casting big fireball spells, this is one of them. Yeah, I mean, so overall, Law of Primal Frost, you basically got one buff thing, one kind of janky thing, and then one big damage spell. So pretty fair as far as laws go, and will actually provide serious competition for the laws in the books. Obviously, Hoarfrost is the best spell here by a mile, and you're going to take this all the time in all sorts of different armies. Okay, so command traits. So these are for ANDTORRRR loci, and you can pick one of these. So actually quite good to look at, because there are a lot of armies with completely horrible command traits. I think Ogre Maw Tribes is one of them. So this might be good to look at. So first one is you know all the spells from the Law of Primal Frost. I actually kind of like this one because it means you can also take one spell from your own thing, and if you had a spell enhancement, you could take 2 and know like 5 spells. Could be really good. At the start of your hero phase, you get a Primal Dice and a 5-up. That's whatever. If you suffer a Primal Miscast once per battle on a 3-up, you can ignore it. That's kind of okay. And each time you unbind a spell, roll a dice, and on a 5-up, you make the enemy no longer know that spell. I think all of these are a little bit, yeah, a bit how you doing. I think Chilled to the Bone probably has some specific applications where you'd use it, but the fact that it's a 3-up and not necessarily that reliable makes it not so great. I think Shaman of the Chilled Lands, where you know all these spells, is probably the best here. Yeah, Eater of Magic I think is too specific and too random. Yeah. Okay, we have the core battalions. Now, last season, the core battalions were like, I would say, fairly bad, but towards the end, we saw a trend towards Galatian sharpshooters. I'm not sure that was the right trend, but it was there. There was definitely like some kind of like negative power creep, or not power creep, drop creep, I guess would be the term. Like people were getting like more and more drops towards the end there. I definitely was doing it as well. I think in general, it's fair to say that Games Workshop must have some data about the strength of high drop versus low drop. I think they saw the first season with Hunter of the Heartlands and like Double Warlord, which I think was insane. And at the time, I don't think we realized how good it was, but I think that was ridiculous. And I think the season after that, where we had Bounty Hunters and Expert Conquerors, that was like even more ridiculous. And I think probably high drop had an insane win rate there that we didn't quite realize. I think they probably have some data on that. So they think that high drop is really strong, I think. So as a result, they've given us some battalions that really don't do that much. So the Andtorrian Acolytes, at the start of the hero phase, if you've got 2 or more Andtorrian Lurkus units in this battalion on the battlefield, and you roll the dice, on a 3-up you get 1 primal magic dice. That's pretty good, but you can only take this once. And it's going to be, instead of taking like a Warlord probably, because you need 2 wizards in it. And obviously you can't be low drop if you take this, but there might be some like 3-drop sweet zone where you're taking like 5 heroes or 6 heroes. I guess it would be 5 heroes, right? So 3 heroes outside of this battalion in the battle regiment, and then you could take 2 of these guys in the Andtorrian Acolytes, and then the rest of your army in the battle regiment. That's probably quite good. That's probably quite a good sweet spot, because you're obviously still going to outdrop the Warlord, the Command Entourage Battle Regiment Classic. So that might be quite a good sweet spot. And then we have the Wizard Finders of Andtor, and this is kind of a weird structure, because you need like a hero with a wounds characteristic of less than 10. And then you also need 1 unit of infantry, and then you have an optional 1 unit of infantry and a monster. So you can put a monster in this, which is kind of funny. And this is Magic Hunters. So when you fight with these guys, you can add 1 to their attacks characteristic in melee, but all of the attacks must target an enemy wizard, and you cannot include wizards in this battalion. So that's kind of crap. Yeah, it's not that great. I mean, I'd say like if you have a big hammer, that's probably going to hit a wizard at some point. Like it might hit like an Archeon or like an Alariel or something. Like those sorts of like wizard monsters, if you can imagine yourself maybe charging them at some point, this is probably not bad. But the list of things that truly get massively good with +1 attack is actually not that long, I don't think. Like just thinking about the units that I use, I don't think +1 attack shifts the needle that much. The units where it does is something like Bloodletters, which has like 2 really high value attacks that do mortal wounds, or something like a Wardens from Lumineth, but obviously they couldn't be in here because they're a wizard. What else could we put in here? Yeah, like, I don't know, Graveguard or something like that, right? Where +1 attack really means a big deal. Then this might be decent. The monsters usually only have like a couple weapon profiles, so +1 attack is just really whatever. Yeah, it's alright. But as I was saying, like, I think that they think that high drop is strong, so that's why they're doing this. Yeah. All right. So, I mean, I think I'm gonna have some fun with this though. I mean, I'm definitely probably gonna put like multiple units of Bloodletters in this. Have some fun. You could I don't know what you could do with the monster. You could probably put like a Gargan in there. It might be fun. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. We're into the bit which is probably the most important, which is the grand strategy and the battle tactics. Now, this is a little bit dry. I always kind of get to this point and I'm a little bit kind of about talking about it, but it's very important, okay? This is actually, these next 2 pages, probably the most important next 2 pages of the season that you will read, okay? So, we have to kind of zone in here. All right, so, here we go. We have Control the Nexus. When the battle ends, you complete this grand strategy if 2 or more friendly wizards are wholly within 6 of the center of the battlefield. Usually, there's grand strategies from factions that are better than this, but it's okay if you have like 6 wizards. I also think it's pretty good for Lumineth because their whole army are wizards. So it's pretty good, I think. Yeah. Spellcasting Savant. When the battle ends, you complete this grand strategy if the model picked to your general is a Locus and they have not been slain. Again, quite good. There's quite a lot of armies that are going to use this, but there's obviously still an element of risk involved, especially now because heroes can be shot. There's no protection anymore. It's much easier to kill them. Slaughter of Sorcery. When the battle ends, you complete this grand strategy if there are no wizard units on the battlefield. I really like this one, and the reason I like this one is because if you get matched up against, like, so let's say you're playing like Khorne vs. Khorne, and your opponent has no wizards, you just get it. You don't have to do anything, you just get it. Yeah, and even if they have 1 wizard or something, like, it's easy to hunt down the 1 wizard. It really is. Like, if you just send something back there, I think it's usually quite doable. So, I think this one is quite good. I think with Khorne, this is probably the one I would look at taking. Alright, Baron Eyescape. When the battle ends, you complete this grand strategy if all enemy units that have artifacts of power are destroyed and there are no enemy units within 6 of the center of the battlefield. This one's terrible. Never take this under any circumstance because it's too hard on every level. Moving on. Okay, Overshadow. You complete this grand strategy if all enemy units from your opponent's starting army are destroyed and you've got at least one battle line unit. So basically, this is kind of a return of No Place from the Weak from the first edition, and you're really going to look at taking this with armies like, KO has better options, but you could take it with KO. Just, armies that do 1 million damage, you can just take this and say, I'm going to table my opponent, and that's how I'm going to win the game, so let's just take this thing that relies on me tabling my opponent. There you go. Magic Make Manifest. If you have 2 or more endless spells or incarnates on the battlefield that are controlled by or bonded to friendly units, I don't like this one. The 2 or more endless spells, maybe there's some armies that can do that, but in general, you'd have to make sure that you're going second in the battle round or something, because you don't want your opponent to dispel them and then lose the grand strat. And the incarnate usually is dead by the end of the game, so yeah, I don't really like that one. So I think the best ones here are probably the Slaughter of Sorcery and the Overshadow. And if you don't have anything better in your army, you might take Control the Nexus. Yeah. Okay, Battle Tactics. Here we go. So, last season, I didn't like the battle tactics very much. I'm not going to lie. It was really hard for a lot of armies to play the game last season because they were just too hard. And I think probably the same thing's going to happen this season, but let's look at it. Okay, so intimidate the invaders. This can be a viable turn 1 for quite a few armies on a lot of battle plans. Basically, at the end of your turn, if there are more friendly units wholly outside your territory than friendly units within your territory, you score this. So if you charge all your stuff forward, or at least half of it, then you're going to get this. So simple, because in a way your opponent doesn't have that much counterplay. You've just got to be careful about exactly counting it and then charging the unit in, and then that unit dies or something, then you'd fail the battle tactics. That's what you got to be careful about. Okay, Reprisal. You complete this battle tactic if an enemy unit that destroyed a friendly general earlier in the battle is destroyed in this turn. This is very hard unless you have multiple generals. So this might be the return of Kragnos and Gordrak and Gobsprak, the I don't know. There's several armies where you can have multiple War Masters that they're probably going to die at some point, and this is quite good in those armies. Yeah, but still kind of situational. Yeah. Endless Expropriation. This one, the formatting on this number 3 here just hurts my brain, but basically you pick one enemy unit that's controlling or bonded to an endless spell or incarnate, and you complete this battle tactic at the end of the turn if any of the following are true. That enemy unit's been destroyed. That endless spell is wild. That endless spell is controlled to or bonded to a friendly unit, or that incarnate is wild. Okay, so I think you can kind of ignore the from 2 to 4. This is pick an enemy unit that casts an endless spell or is an incarnate and destroy them. That's what this is. Ignore the garbage text below that, because if you're picking it, if you're trying to get rid of the endless spell or make it wild or whatever, your opponent's just going to dispel it. Okay, so this is really just pick something that controlled an endless spell or an incarnate and kill it. Yeah. Magical Dominance. Okay, this one's interesting. So we have you need to cast one spell and have none of those spells unbound. Yes. So I think in the leak this came out as you could only cast one spell, but now it's just you need to cast one or more spells, and then none of the spells cast by any units of your army are unbound. So this is quite good if you do some counter deployment, right? You've deployed in a way where your opponent's not in unbind range turn 1, and then you can do this. Obviously, if you are a Seraphon frog, God bless frogs, then you're very good at denying this. Croak is extremely good at denying this, and that kind of grinds my gears a bit. But anyway, it's Croak. We know that this is a thing. Okay, so yes, if a friendly wizard unit's capable of getting a spell off, then yeah, you can do this. Obviously, there's a degree of risk with this if you're not Zinch, but if you're Zinch and you can cheat, then it's fine. Okay, Magical Mayhem. If you kill a unit with a spell, then you get this. I don't really like that this one's in the game because, I think it kind of... I don't know, there's a lot of armies that already have a battle tactic that does this. So now the fact that you get 2, like Sylvaneth has something like this. The fact that you get another one kind of sucks. But anyway, it is what it is. Okay, bait and trap. You complete this battle tactic. Okay, if 2 or more friendly units retreat, and if 2 or more friendly units make a charge move, now they have to be different. Okay, so you basically need to retreat with 2 units or charge with 2 units. So necessarily, you need to start in combat with 2 units. Now, if you're Blades of Khorne, you can Murderlust into combat and then retreat. Nobody does that ever, but this would be a situation where you could do this. So that could be good for bait and trap. Like Murderlust into combat, just move an inch into combat and then retreat out. It's possible, right? There's some other tricks I'm sure you can do with this. Like, for example, if you have a unit that can retreat in the combat phase, there are a few of those these days, okay? You could do that and then just charge with 2 other units, okay? You'd have to basically charge with 4 units, but it's doable, right? Yeah. That's that. Okay, so, let's make an example. If you have a hero phase charge, so if you have Iron Jaws, you could, like, charge, let's see here. I guess you could charge 2 units in, retreat those units, and then charge 2 other units in later. Something weird like that you could do, yeah. So there's some jank you can do here, but for most armies, it's going to be not possible unless you already have 2 units within 3. So you're going to look and you go, do I have 2 units within 3? No, I don't. Let's fucking do something else then, alright? But that's going to be, if the checklist in your head is thinking, what battle tactic am I doing? You just check if 2 units are within 3, or you have a way to get them within 3. If they're not, then move on, alright? Okay, led into the Maelstrom. You complete this battle tactic if 1 or more friendly heroes and 1 or more friendly battle line units made a charge move this turn, and at least one of those units is within 3 of an enemy unit at the end of the turn. I think this is going to be like the one like Eye for an Eye, where you don't really know what to do, but probably it's going to be fine. This is going to be one of them. Just don't kill too much and stuff it up. If you just charge a bunch of stuff in, probably going to get it, right? Surround and destroy. Pick 3 different friendly units on the battlefield. You complete this battle tactic at the end of the turn if each of those units is wholly within 6 of a different battlefield edge, and 2 or more of those units are wholly outside your territory. So basically, this is going to mean, okay, 1 is going to sit in your battlefield edge, and then the 2 others need to sit on the side of the battlefield edge, wholly outside your territory. So, there are quite a few missions where the territories are just split down the middle, and you're going to need something that's like decently fast if you want to do this turn 1, okay? So, yes, this is kind of one that you want to plan for. Now, the thing is, you need to pick 3 different friendly units on the battlefield, so reserve units are not going to count for this, but if you have something with like teleports, like Khainite Shadowstalkers or something, then this is going to be much easier because of that. Alright. So those are the battle tactics. Yeah, I think overall a similar difficulty to last season, but there's a few less like gimmies, like Eye for an Eye or something. There's a few more things to think about, but I think the curve is a little bit more even. In the sense that last season I really felt that there were a few that were just like impossible unless you had a certain build. Now I think like most of these are pretty doable. Like, have stuff outside your territory. Reprisals, probably like a turn 4 or 5 move. Endless Expropriation, if your opponent has wizards, is doable. If you have wizards, Magical Dominance is doable. If you have wizards, Magical Mayhem's doable. And then if you're kind of a combat army, you have like Bait and Trap and Led into the Maelstrom. And then Surround and Destroy will work for most armies, I think. So, except Castle armies. So you can kind of see how there's like battle tactics for most builds in here. That's nice. I like that. Last season there wasn't that. So it's it's quite even, I think. All right. Cool. So, we are into the battle plans. All right. How am I doing for time? All right. It's not too late. Okay, so battle plans. I posted on Twitter that I didn't like the battle plans from last season, and then I immediately posted afterwards. Maybe I shouldn't have posted that because I'm just going to go to the one that I really hate first. So, we're going to start with a really bad one, and we're going to kind of work back up, okay? We're going to end on a good note because there's a few ones in here that I really like, but there's one of them here that is just awful, and that's this one, the Ice Fields. Okay, now why is this one bad? Well, it's got this rule called Ice Crusted Domain, which is each time a unit runs, it suffers D3 mortal wounds, and when you make a charge roll for a unit, for each dice that shows a 1 before modifiers are applied, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. Like, this is not fun for anyone involved. I'm sorry. It's just not. Like, the reason why this running one is such a big deal is, like, so many armors you want to run a support hero, and just taking D through mortal wounds every time you run a support hero just sucks, man. It's so bad. Especially since they've lost the kind of protection now. So, yeah, this kind of incentivizes shooting armies in a way, like teleport shooting armies where you don't really charge and you don't really run, you know? And that's why I don't like this one. Now, the actual layout is kind of interesting in the sense that you have like this kind of lurkers below style territory thing, but you deploy very close. So this is quite similar to I've lost the name of it, but there was one in the previous season, the previous season. So the Bounty Hunters one, where you could rally on a 4-up. It had a very similar kind of layout to this. Yeah, so this one, you have 6 objectives, okay, that are quite close together in the middle. So it's like a little bit of like a scrum kind of thing, because there's no incentive for these sides at all. And generally speaking, I'm not a fan of those missions whatsoever, but this one, I don't necessarily hate the layout of the objectives. I just really just hate this rule. And I think it's just kind of unfun. Yeah, I think as a play experience point of view, that this kind of rule is just a bad idea. I always thought with Silksteel Nest from the season before, basically that mission was amazing, but it just had this one rule that felt a bit bad, and so people just didn't include it in packs. And I think this probably will have the same thing, where the objective layout looks good, but this rule is so NPE that it's probably not going to get played. Okay, anyway, that's that one. Let's complain out the way. Okay, we got Powerflex. This one is a bit of a mindfuck, I have to say. So this one, basically, we have a split down the middle. Okay, so that has big implications for battle tactics because it's hard to get out your territory, right? And you have BB and AA. So you got these 2 pairs of objectives. And basically, the person who's going second picks which one's activated. So there's a big incentive to go second here. So this is going to be similar to like your Prize of Gallet or Jaws of Gallet, where going second is big. But actually, the problem with it, it's got the kind of same thing as Proving Ground, where, okay, you can pick a Proving Ground, but then your opponent gets the first move onto it. So here, it's got the same problem, right? Where you can like pick, you know, for example, if your opponent's sitting on their home objective, you could pick like, okay, we're going to go beta, and they have to like split up their forces to get this, but they're going to get both of them realistically and score a bunch of points. So this actually, now that I'm looking at this, looks more like Only the Worthy from last season, where there's like a whole bunch of rules text, but if you just look at that layout of the objectives, right, these are all so insanely close together, man. And it's just going to be a big punch up in the middle, I think. Yeah, but here are how the victory points are scored. It's if you get 1 activate objective, you get 1. Otherwise, you get 1. So basically 1, 2. And then if you control with an Antorian Locus and they don't have an Antorian Locus, you get 1 point. And if you destroyed a wizard, you get 1 point. So kind of theoretically equal there, but I think slightly shifted towards the Antorian Loci users. Yeah, I think it's probably just going to be a big punch up in the middle, but at least there's some incentive for going second in this kind of mission, so that's alright. Okay, Geomantic Pulse. So this one, again, is quite complicated, and I always have been a fan of this kind of objective layout. It looks like a scrum in the middle, but actually what ends up happening is, like, one player will kind of take each side. So usually, you know, you'll go on this like B side and your opponent will take the A side, and then you start playing long ways. That's what tends to happen in this sorts of missions. There was one, again, I don't quite remember the name, but there was one like this in the season before previous, where basically it was 2 objectives in the middle and you kind of just tend to castle up on one of them, and that's probably going to happen here. So again, we have a second turn incentive here. Okay, so this tells you everything that Games Workshop thinks about going first. It obviously... Going first is very good in Warhammer, okay? So they're trying to give second turn incentive. And basically, you're going to pick either objective A or B to be the pulse for that battle round, okay? And at the start of each subsequent battle round, the objective adjacent to that pulse has not yet been... The pulse becomes the pulse. Okay, so basically, the second battle round, okay, the person who's going second will pick the first pulse. Okay, and then the objective adjacent to the pulse that's not yet been the pulse becomes the pulse. So, for example, you're going to go, let's see here. You're going to start on either A or either B, and you're basically going to go like left to right. Okay, that's the way it works. Now, the way the scoring works is basically you get 1 if you control an objective, 2 if you control the pulse, and then 1 additional victory point for each objective adjacent to the pulse you control, and 2 if you get the battle tactic. So you could get, in theory, you could get 4, 5, 7 points, right? So on the turn where it's over here in this right side of the screen, I know my cursor's kind of small, but on the right side you have 2 objectives adjacent. So you get 1 for controlling an objective, 2 for controlling from the post, and then 2 for controlling, each adjacent objective. So 2 for controlling each of those adjacent objectives, and then 2 for the battle tactics. So quite a high scoring mission. And yeah, you can see how the second turn will have a big incentive at the second battle round. But I think this one will really hinge on the priority into third turn, is my kind of prediction. But an interesting one for sure. I'm a fan of that one. Okay, Nexus Collapse. Okay, so at the start of each battle round after the first, after determining which player will take the first turn, the player with the fewest victory points can choose to collapse up to 2 objectives. So we got a kind of like comeback mechanic here. All right, if both players are tied on victory points, they roll off. I hate that. But anyway, you roll off and the winner can choose to collapse 1 objective at least. Okay, roll the dice for each unit within 6 of the collapsed objectives on a 4-up. They take D2 and mortal wounds, so similar to Silk Steel Nests for a while ago. Alright, well, my recording stopped. I went way further than this, but anyway, we're going to do this again. I was talking about Nexus Collapse. So, victory points. Now, this is just 1, 2 more. So, yeah, like days of old. Now, what's interesting about this one, this is what the objectives looks like. So, basically, we have 2 lots of 3, and some of them are kind of in like a hard to reach area. Like if you're a little orange fire slayer lad looking to lug yourself over here, it looks a little bit not so great. So what you can do is if you're going second, you can choose to like delete 2 of them if you're you're just not when you're going second. It's just the player with the fewest victory points, right? So if you for example, like deliberately throw a battle tactic turn 1, you might be able to get yourself in a position where you can burn these 2, right? Which is quite interesting. So now the only thing with burning objectives, okay, is if you are behind in victory points and you start burning objectives, you might be in a situation where you can stop yourself from scoring yourself back in the game. So don't burn all the objectives. Now, you'll notice that theoretically you could burn 6 objectives in 3 turns, all right? And that would mean that we have no objectives in round 4 and 5, and that could theoretically happen, okay? But obviously the player who's losing doesn't necessarily want to burn, I think, in round 4. So I think most likely you're going to end up having like a situation where, you're going to burn probably none. In battle round 4, you might burn 1, right? That's possible. But most of the time, if you're losing, you probably just don't burn then. Now, the bit I don't like, I kind of said it before, is the roll-off part, right? So if you both score 5 turn 1, and there's a roll-off to like burn like a home objective or something, I just think that's kind of nonsense, man. Surely there's another way to do this. Like if you're tied, I think the person going second, right, should get to collapse 1 objective. I think it should be something like that. Yeah, because it's a little too random. I don't like the roll-off aspect, but anyway. Okay, then we are on to lines of communication. Kind of a fun theme, but yeah, I think this is another one of the slightly NPE ones. So basically, here's what the objectives look like. It's normal 1, 2 more scoring, but at the start of each battle round, after determining who will take the first turn, the person who's going second can do a little bit of signal jamming. All right, you can pretend like you're playing Star Wars Legion. I don't know if that's a mechanic, man, but it feels like it should be. They do lots of like radio things in Star Wars. You ever notice about like old sci-fi movies that they always have so many scenes where they're like using some like phone technology, you know? And then even now, like, I don't know if you guys have noticed, especially in like K-dramas or like J-dramas or something, there's always just random scenes where people are like texting each other and they will tell the story through text on a phone. Like there's still so much storytelling in movies that happen through like phones, and back in the day in like Star Wars and stuff, there's that too. It's very strange. But yes, anyway, basically, when you disrupt your opponent and do some signal jamming, you can pick a phase, and during that battle round, each time a model from your opponent's army issues a command in that phase, their opponent must roll a dice. On a 3-up, an additional command point must be spent in order to issue that command. And your opponent can choose whether or not to spend the additional command point. But if they don't, or if you don't have the extra command points, then basically the original command point you used is lost, and the command still counts as being used, which is horrid. It's kind of, you can play around it, but it's still a 3-up, and sometimes you're just not going to have enough CPs, especially since the person going first here is going to have like 2 CP, right? And like a non-magic army might have 4 CP going second, so there's like a massive CP advantage you can gain here. Now, if your opponent's playing Pretender Slanesh, I don't think they're going to care anyway, but there's some armies that have like low CP, right? Definitely like Flesh Eater Course is going to feel this, for sure. Yeah, so that's that. Yeah, now there's a combo with Total Eclipse here where you can make your opponent spend 3 command points to do stuff, which is horrid. Yeah, that's a thing. But as far as the bad ones go here, this is definitely like this is fine. This is better than the Frozen one. Okay, every step is forward. This is the ultimate Zerg mission. I love it. So here's the setup. So you are so close to your opponent. Like this looks like madness to me. You're so close. Like, okay, you can deploy in this corner, but your opponent can still deploy like here, right? Or yeah, like and any of these, like this leg here is just like the leg of death. Like if you go there, you're just gonna get like locked in the corner by something and die. It's a scary deployment. It's a very scary deployment. Okay, and basically it's 1-2 more, but the special rule here, I like that this one is just one special rule. I kind of would like all of them to be this, but if a unit makes a charge move until the end of that turn, add 1 to the number of models that each model in that unit counts for the purposes of contesting objectives, and if you retreat, you count as no models. Okay, so this is insane for something like, I don't know, pink horrors that can like fix charges and charge a long way and then count for 1 million, or like, oh man, this mission for Soulblight Gravelords is just disgusting, like, because it's actually quite spread. Like these are quite far apart, so if you kind of got a lot of stuff, it's super good. And if you have lots of bodies, you're going to get very much rewarded here. Now, just for a bit of trivia, if you're playing Taker's Gargants and you charge, how many models are you going to be worth? 31. Oh no, poor Gargants. You get 1 extra model, so yeah, 31. It's not 60, so it's a shame. It's a shame, but this is obviously very good for like Horde charge armies. It's really good for something like Khorne. It's really good for even like Fire Slayers. Yeah, lots of Horde kind of foot slogging armies. This is going to be great. Yeah, from someone who organizes teams tournaments, I really like having this kind of thing in the pack because it can swing. This can definitely swing some matchups. Like you're playing Khorne into a bad matchup like KO or something. Maybe actually this could be doable just because of the primary. Yeah. Okay. Limited resources. This is my jam. This is the one. This is the best one. This is amazing. Okay. So this is what it looks like, the layout. With the layout, super interesting, right? Because you can kind of take one side, or you can play like the spread game because like these two are really far apart, right? Or you can just fully spread out, or you can just castle on one side. Plenty of stuff you can do here, right? The deployment is super variable because you could like deep deploy on one side and say I'm going to control this, or like deploy far on one side and threaten taking your opponent's side that they want to castle on. So much stuff you can do with deployment here. It's 1-2 more, and I really like the special rule here, which is basically when a player gains control of an objective, you can like siphon meltwater from it. I don't know what meltwater is. Meltwater is water. Oh no, this arcane infused liquid holds healing properties your warriors desperately need. Okay, so it's like you got healing properties, but anyway. It is a limited resource. So, after you gather the meltwater from an objective, which happens when you control it, okay? After scoring victory points, if the player whose turn it is controls an objective that they controlled at the end of their previous turn, they have siphoned all the meltwater from that objective. For the rest of that battle, that player cannot control that objective. Okay, now you can still stop your opponent from controlling the objective, so you can still contest, but you can never control it ever again. So What this means is if you're someone who wants to castle on one side over here, is you might be in a situation where you might be scoring nothing for the rest of the game. So there's a foreseeable scenario where both of you and your opponent castle on one side here. Okay. So you control this for 1 round. Your opponent controls this for 1 round. And then it goes back to your turn. You control this, and then they control this. Okay? And then what happens is, none of you can score either of these sides. So you need to start doing stuff. So there's kind of like an anti-castle mechanic here, right? Like you cannot castle on one objective and hope to win the game here. You need to be be getting shit done. All right, and I love that. Because to me, Warhammer is not about sitting croak and a bunch of frogs on an objective, okay? We want to be doing stuff. So this is what this mission does. This is a banger. This is a 10 out of 10. This is what we want. All right, limited resources. Gets my gold star. Okay, Spring the Trap. Okay, so this one, we have like 3 missions. It looks a little bit like Position Over Power, right? It's the same deployment, I believe. Yep, so 9 away, and we got this kind of like zony sort of deployment here. And now this one is super easy for doing the one where you got to have like the battle tactic where you got to have Hollywood in 6 at this battlefield edge and wholly outside your territory. You just move like 1 unit here, and then just have 1 unit at the back, right? Super easy. And it's also super easy to do the one to just have stuff outside your territory. So I haven't really been talking about the battle tactics so far, but just keep the territories in mind, right? Basically, if the territories are smaller, the easier the battle tactics are for most armies, okay? That's the general rule. So these are quite small, so they're a bit easier. And you can remove D3 units from the battlefield after deployment and outflank them. Yeah, it's quite interesting that that's now in a mission. Yeah, because there are a whole bunch of armies that have charge bonuses and stuff, and usually the balancing factor is they can't remove them from the battlefield. So being able to remove Kragnos from the battlefield, for example, is amazing. What I like about this is it might kind of swing some matchups where you need to keep like a key linchpin alive. But you normally don't have a way to do that. This might be like a little bit of a counterplay thing. But overall, I think just a solid mission. Nothing particularly game-breaking here. I think this objective layout will always be slightly less suited to shooting armies. You can kind of see that there's nothing to hold at the back. So to me, it looks like a Soulblight Gravelord's mission. Like have a bunch of stuff on the objectives and have like spawning abilities to come on the side here, but at least they've got this outflank here to kind of balance that capacity that some armies have to outflank and others don't. Yeah, that's that mission. Okay, Fountains of Frost. Okay, so this one, it's kind of the first one we've seen. Like, I guess there was one where you score a victory point, but this is one of the other ones where an Andtorran Locust gets an explicit bonus. So here, the Loci counts as 10 models, and at the start of the Battle Shock phase, you roll a dice for each objective that's contested by 3 or more units, and in a 4-up, they take D3 mortal wounds. Okay, so, yeah, this is what it looks like. So, 2 lines of 3, and it's 1, 2 more. Yeah. I think, yeah, it's pretty standard. Like, obviously, your wizards counting as 10 is nice, or the Loci, and at the start of each Battle Shock phase, you just want to make sure that you don't have like 3 units on there, or you might take some mortal wounds. This one's I think the rules for this one are not as big as just the layout of the objectives. So if you look at this, this is extremely well suited to something like Seraphon, okay, where you can kind of castle at the back here, and your opponent's got nothing to fight over in the middle, okay. This is a shooting magic army mission through and through. In teams, if you're playing a melee army, I think you probably want to avoid this one, because a lot of those matchups will end up being quite bad because of the layout. Yeah. If it's melee versus melee, I think this is really interesting because it's like it's the first person who breaks through is kind of who wins this. Yeah, you can obviously like play around one flank and moving through like, you know, your opponent's flank to get through to the middle stuff, or you know, abandoning one of your objectives on the side and kind of trolling these two and these two. Stuff, all sorts of stuff you can do with movement here, but I think ultimately it's going to be for the magic armies, this mission. It's fair enough they get one. Okay, I've already spoken about Ice Fields. It's a 0 out of 10. No. The Frigid Zephyr. I love this one because I hate shooting, but I have to say it's probably a bit impactful, and I think you're going to struggle to include it in a non-teams format because people just complain. Okay, so at the start of the battlefield, there's a Squall, And a scroll means that units and more than 12 inch apart are not visible to each other. So basically everything has 12 inch range. You can think of it like that. And in addition, until the scroll dissipates, models cannot fly. That's not a huge deal, but if you're playing on a bunch of like impassable terrain, yeah, it might suck. At the start of each battle round after the first, after you pick who's going first and that, if the scroll is not dissipated, the person taking the second roll rolls a dice. I don't know why they word that as if that's an advantage that you get to roll the dice, but anyway, the person going second gets to roll the dice. And they add the number of the current battle round to the score, and on a 7+, the scroll dissipates. So basically, on round 2, it's a 5 up, round 3, it's a 4 up, round 4, it's a 3 up, and then round 5, it's a 2 up. So similar to, I think Lariel has like a similar thing, right? Yeah, so, yeah, I think basically most of the time it's going to be gone by round 3 is how it statistically would work, but still not that huge. Definitely by round 4 you'd expect it to be gone, but by then for shooting armies, shooting armies really need to get stuff done every turn, because the way this game is balanced is that shooting armies just do less damage than melee armies, okay? So they need to get stuff done every turn, so this is just horrible for shooting armies. And it's also terrible for magic armies because most spells don't have 12-inch range. So, yes, it's a problem. But obviously, if you're playing magic into shooting, then the magic army should win this one. It's just if you're playing magic into melee, then I'd expect the melee army to have an edge here. Yes, but a very impactful mission for sure. Okay. No reward without risk. Okay, so this is a kind of another wizard-centric one. But okay, so here's what the objectives look like. Now, it's all in the middle. In addition to being all in the middle, let's look at the deployment rules, because there's an ominous thing that's missing here. Do you see it? So nothing about 9 inch away. So we can literally deploy everything in the middle. We could literally deploy, like, everything around this thing. And you could even deploy within 3 of your opponent. Mental. Okay, I don't think that is a bug, but yeah. It's 1-2 more, and battle tactic. And when a wizard is slain on a 4-up, they blow up, and then each enemy, not enemy unit, but each unit, so both players, within a number of inches equal to that wounds characteristic of that wizard. So if they have a wounds characteristic of 6, every unit within 6 of them takes D3. Yeah, whatever. But it's on a 4-up. Not 4-up per unit, but 4-up when the wizard dies, then the effect happens. So, I mean, relatively minor. It might happen, like, sometimes, but I think it's more the objective layout that makes this really good for melee armies. I mean, sure, it's a deep deployment, but you can literally deploy here, so, I mean, that's only... I don't know what the value of that diagonal is. It's Pythagoras, I cannot be bothered doing that, but yeah, it's not very far. I don't know, it's probably like something like 36 or something. I don't know what the measurement is, but it's not as deep as it seems, for sure. Yeah. And if you deploy really deep, you just can't get any objectives. So you kind of need to fight in the middle. Yeah, it's another scrum in the middle one where you start too close. I'm not a fan of those. I think it just makes for very one-sided games. I think that one's like a 3 out of 10 for me. Okay, towers in the Tundra, the one that just doesn't work at the moment, but I like the idea. So basically, there's 2 towers and there's 2 objectives. So first of all, let's talk about the objectives. You get 1 point. Basically, you get 1, 2. So potentially 2 points. So basically 1 for each objective. And the battle tactic. Okay, and then... Okay, so first thing is, people might miss this, but over the left it says that you actually need to guarantee that you have a defensible terrain feature that's set up wholly within each territory, okay? So there will be a defensible terrain feature. And then in deployment, you need to pick a defensible terrain feature or faction... terrain feature wholly within their territory to represent a wizard's tower, which then also gets arcane. Okay. And the way you score with the Wizard's Tower, if you're garrisoning it, you get 2 points. And if your starting army does not include any units that could garrison, i.e. Gargants, you could score 2 victory points if you control the Wizard's Tower in your territory instead. Of course, the problem with this is to control the defensible terrain feature, you need to garrison it. Okay, so that's a problem. Now, on one level it's a problem, and then on another level it's not a problem because, well... There's a thing where you could pick a faction terrain feature that's not a defensible terrain feature, and then you could control it. So if you're playing ogres and you just have a bunch of stone horns, you could pick a pot. and then you can control the pot because it's not a garrisonable terrain feature, right? So you could have no units to garrison, and you could just pick a normal faction terrain feature that's not a tower, and then get the 2 points. But then the problem is, your opponent's going to score 2 points because you're not going to have units garrisoning the wizard tower. So if you're playing Gargants, sure, you score 2 points in your turn, but your opponent's going to automatically score 2 points on their turn for no reason. So this mission, it just does not work, like, at the moment. This mission, like, I if this is not fact, by the time I run Release the Beast, it's not going to be in the pack, because it does not work as a mission. It needs fixing. So we've come to the end of this video. I hope this was good to get some ideas about what I thought about this GHB. I think overall I'm like pretty decently happy with the battle plans. Like, of course there's going to be a few duds, but honestly nothing is as bad as Twists and Turns, and probably nothing is as bad as Lurkers. Okay, they were both just like awful, and Realmstone Cache was also awful, and Jaws of Galat was also awful, and Prize of Galat was also awful. Okay, those are my hot takes, but like, man, we had some seriously terrible battle plans last season, okay? Battle plans where the priority to give your opponent second was way too impactful on, like, Jaws of Galat, right? We had missions where, you know, in Lurkers, if your opponent won the first 2 priorities, it was so hard to, like, get in the game. It's just impossible. And, you know, most of the time you end up getting, like, completely blown out and 20-0'd when that happens. So here we haven't got that. Okay, there's no instant win scenario. Thank God that they've got rid of that, because I'm so tired of them ruining every season. And by the way, I think most people just never play Lurkers because, like, in singles tournaments, the TO will never put it in there. But the thing is with team tournaments is they, like, including myself, I always include the whole pack. Now here I will not include the tower one until it's fixed, because this is just, like, completely dysfunctional. But overall, I'm happy. Let me know your thoughts. I'm keen. That'll be at the end of this video. Thank you.